running a business is a tough and lonely journey. Welcome to the Executives on the Frontlines podcast, where business owners and C-suite executives like you will get real answers to your everyday business problems. I'm your host, Jeff Palacio, and together we will learn from senior leaders who have occupied every top box of a company's org chart for every size organization and who like to roll up their sleeves while checking their egos at the door. Welcome to the Executives on the Frontlines podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Palacio. In today's episode, we're going to discuss how the traditional sales and marketing methodology has become less effective in growing a company in a profitable manner. And our guest today is Sean Storm. Sean, welcome to the podcast.
Jeff, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm very excited to talk to you. The sales and marketing is in the kind of the core of my career, and I love your approach to it. But I know a lot about you, but maybe give a brief description of your background and what you do.
Sure. Thank you. Two Fortune 500 companies at the front end of my career, actually front end and heading toward the middle of my career, one being Yellow Freight System, the other one being Grainger Incorporated, both multi-billion-dollar corporations. And I mentioned them specifically for a reason, because we may talk about them within this podcast. And then a lot of small, large businesses, so anywhere from 20 million to 100 million, whether I was running the organization or actually running the company as a president and COO. And then about 15 years ago, I went out on my own. And at that point was lucky enough in the Kansas City area to get the Growth Strategies guest column inside of the Kansas City Business Journal. And that column did well for about 6 years. It was bi-monthly. So a lot of people saw it. And then it eventually went national within the American City Business Journals. And that reached 42 markets on a weekly basis. So thought leadership at that point, but all built around this issue of, man, how can we drive revenue not only profitably, but consistently and hopefully exponentially?
Yeah, I love that. I know I've listened to some of your other guest appearances on podcasts, but you talk about this business disease today that has reached, epidemic, proportions. So, tell us about that.
So this will probably be a bit underwhelming to some because they may have heard the term, but it is this issue of sameness, and it is the business disease that's reached epidemic proportions. It's everywhere. I mentioned Yellow, I mentioned Grainger. I can remember when I went to work at Grainger in the early 2000s, and I thought to myself, I come from transportation, good 12 years at the front end of my career. I know a thing or two about distribution. I looked at Grainger once I got to know them well, and I thought to myself, why are we even having to sell? It was the coolest, most operationally precise company I'd ever seen in my life. Why are we even having to compete? And so I've been reading a lot about demand creation, which is not demand generation. That's more of a marketing term. This issue of demand creation is really this issue of, and it sounds fantastic, Jeff, but how do we get ideal clients to come to us without any prodding? Because that warrants a different conversation than if we're going out, which most people do, right? Most salespeople, most organizations, they're spending a lot of time and money and effort just to get a conversation with a decision maker. So that's what I was really wondering is why at Grainger, why do we have to even go sell? How come people aren't just showing up on our doorstep? But it's this issue of sameness, the disease.
Interesting. And what do you think causes it, Sean?
So, it spawns a copycat economy, right? So one of the fun things I like to do is I get called into some C-level team, all the C people are in the room, and we start knocking around a bunch of different topics. And I'll say, look, let's start here. Let's start with sameness. Oh, we don't live in a sea of sameness. Okay, let's pull up your homepage, your website, and your 5 biggest competitors. Jeff, do you think those homepages look the same, or do you think they look distinctly different?
I catch on pretty quick, Sean. I'm going to say they look the same.
On to the speed round. Good job. Yeah. And so, if you took the names, the company names off those websites, boy, they look eerily familiar. So we could talk for hours. You have a marketing background. A lot, not all, but a lot of marketing companies, when you say, hey, we need a website built, they're going to have you choose from a template. And if you're in construction or logistics, they know kind of what those templates look like. And this whole sameness disease starts to take hold. So some of the causes are that. Some of the causes are, this is nobody's fault, by the way. Maybe somebody, a founder, started a company because they had an idea. They don't know how to create distinction. They don't know how to create marketplace separation. They don't know how to break from the competitive herd. They're going to set up shop, hang the shingle, start selling like crazy, get some traction, the revenue comes in, and then they try to incrementally grow from then. That's it. That's how 95% of people do it. And I'm convinced that's why most fail in the first 5 years, right? We always hear that really high number that most startups, especially, they fail. So there's that. Then you've got the legacy sales managers and the sales VPs and these people, from the 80s and the 70s and beyond. And they were just poisoned, by the way it used to be. And then, there's a reason why I don't get Christmas invitations to the parties from sales training firms. I am no fan of them. You start teaching all that sales training gloop to all these different salespeople, those salespeople all start to sound the same to the client. So I always say to salespeople, look, when you walk in to see that purchaser, decision maker, whoever they are, they've heard that same junk from the 100 people who preceded you to talk to them. It's just all the same, Jeff.
Interesting. Interesting. And I know you talk about, B2B versus B2C, but it seems this demand creation concept that you talk about is more prevalent on the B2C side. Why is that?
So it's interesting. If we had, an open forum here and a bunch of people listening to this, and we said, name the biggest innovators in the past 30 years, they would name Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, Sarah Blakely, Spanx. It was all these people that are on the B2C side. If you say, okay, give me somebody from B2B, they'd be hard pressed to say, here's somebody who launched something that's business to business, right? That is just, they're phenomenal demand creators, again, where the customers come to them. Here's an example of how prevalent it is on the B2C side, and then I'm sure we'll talk a bit about how you can bring this over to the B2B side. When Steve Jobs passed away, I want to say 2010-ish, you and I are in the Kansas City area. I went to the local Apple store when they opened. What do you think I found right before they opened outside the Apple store? It had come out the night before that Steve Jobs had passed away. What do you think the Leawood store looked like before they opened?
The day after Jobs passed away?
That morning before they opened, people didn't know where to go to grieve. Now think about this. How many companies where the founder dies, where people are out there grieving? There were candlelit ceremonies going on. There were cards, roses, wreaths. It was unbelievable, right?
Wow.
That's just one example. I will often say to a group, I do a lot of keynotes. How many salespeople are inside your average Apple store? You walk into the Apple store, how many salespeople are there? And they will say 5, 10, 15. And the answer is 0. There's not a salesperson to be found in the Apple store because most everybody who's walking in is ready to buy. They're ready to buy. All they want to do is touch it, feel it, experience it a little, get some questions answered, and they're ready to go. How is it that Tesla formed this first big EV automobile company? And Jeff, they have no dealerships, no salespeople, no marketing, no pricing gimmicks. They don't have any of that.
Right.
And look what happened. I'm going to give you one more. I'm going to hold this up. This is my shoe. Can you tell what kind of a shoe this is?
I'm going to
It's a
go with
Skechers.
Sketcher.
It's a Skechers.
Yeah.
Do you know what, here, let me get my head out of the way here. Do you know what this piece right here is called? And what type of shoe it is?
I don't know what that's called, but that is the slip-on Sketcher, I bet.
Jeff, how many thousands of years have people been wearing shoes?
That's a good question, but it's been a while.
How come nobody came up with the slip-on until these guys did a few years ago?
I know, it's incredible, especially especially for kids.
Somebody, somebody sat there, watched people putting on their shoes and said, wait a minute. It's called ethnography, by the way. I always say companies in B2B, they don't know their customer very well because they don't employ this issue of who's the detective, who's the sleuth, who's the scout, right? Who's the trend spotter? And ethnography is the big one. We've all seen Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark. He was an archaeologist. That's the study of ancient civilizations. An ethnographer is somebody who studies how people currently live. Somebody looked at us pulling on these shoes every day and struggling with it and said, wait a minute, there's got to be a better way. Can you believe that Skechers is now the third largest shoe company at $10 billion a year in sales? And the slip-on is a big part of that.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
telling you,
crazy. Yeah, it's interesting about
it's
ethnography. I found out about, now it's probably been 4 or 5 years ago, that Microsoft has like a whole team, like a huge team of ethnographers. I mean, I was like, well, I was blown away. So, uh,
it's
you,
crazy.
yeah,
So that's why we see most of them B2C. I will give you one more. And I say this because I'm throwing down the gauntlet, but it works and my clients get it. And I'm sure there's a whole community out there that gets it, but I'm convinced that the reason why B2C has to innovate to the degree that we just discussed is because they don't have salespeople. If you're in B2B, you can have a sameness product or service, and you can hire this army of salespeople where there's a lot of churn, by the way, they come and they go. But if they pound away hard enough and we can find that one star, right, who can bring business and make it rain, then we're good.
yeah,
Well, they don't have that luxury in B2C. Why is it when Chick-fil-A opens, again, you and I are from Kansas City area, why when Chick-fil-A opened up 5 locations simultaneously in Kansas City, there's no marketing, no billboards, no radio or TV ads, and yet the morning that all of them opened, because I drove around town to 3 of them, and it was tent city, tents set up all outside of Chick-fil-A. Jeff, how the hell does this happen?
right. Yeah, no, it's amazing. It's amazing. So what, I mean,
But if
what
we
do you,
study it,
yeah. Yeah, so what is your kind of recommendation on kind of how does the B2B world, fix this sameness problem and kind of think outside the box?
yeah. So I hear you, and I would say they got to think in completely different boxes, not even outside the box. And so there's 3 things, right? The Demand Creation Institute is a consortium, more or less. And one of the things we learned is this: there are 3 things that they do really well in B2C. And the few demand creators that there are in B2B, they do these 3 things. The first one is operational precision. Most of us have seen the Simon Sinek Golden Circle 15-minute video, which is spectacular. But it's geared around B2C. In fact, Simon uses Apple as the example when he gives that presentation. But there's a fallacy in that presentation when it comes down to B2B. People don't buy the why. I help companies all day, every day, help create corporate purpose. But that why in B2B is meant to be, its utility is internal. It's so that the employees, the partners, whoever inside the organization, they can do away with misalignment, right, and chaos, and they can all be aligned to this corporate purpose. But I'm here to tell you, as important as that is, operational precision is meant to be felt, and purpose is meant to be felt externally in B2B. It's so that if somebody mentions a company, they go, I know them. Man, that's a pretty cool outfit, right? They are so good to work with. In B2B, people buy the how. So we are a W. Edwards Deming-based organization, and the issue of exceptional operations stuff, it's meant to be felt externally to the degree, I'll wrap up here and hit the other 2 fast. How many CEOs, right? I've led companies. How many CEOs have done what I've done, which is you go to, choose a department, the CFO. Let's go to finance and say, how are you helping with the customer experience? Most of them go, what?
Exactly.
If you go to operations, if you go to IT, if you go to HR, how are you helping with the customer experience? Well, guess what? If you challenge them with that, some of them perform wonders and they come up with really cool things. So that's the first one, operational precision. The second one is this issue of organizational health, or organizational fitness is what we call it. It is purpose, mission. We don't do values. We do core behaviors because they're actionable, core obsessions, things of that nature. The only thing I'll mention there, because again, most probably listening to this have a feel for at least what that is. The utility, again, is internal. We don't want to go market that externally. It's meant to be felt externally. Purpose and mission are not the same things. Purpose is why the organization exists and the difference we're trying to make in people's lives. Mission is the core strategy that fulfills the purpose. So you can't have mission without purpose. They are distinctly different, and most in B2B, they mess that up. Vision is what the core purpose or the purpose looks like fulfilled in the future. What does that purpose look like fulfilled in the future? That's what we're aiming for. Well, you can't have vision without purpose. So that's my statement on organizational fitness. Last but not least is the fun part. I hold up the shoe again, right? How do we design unprecedented value? You and I talked about this before the podcast. It's not the unique selling proposition. It's not even close. It's not incremental value. It's not value add. It's what's unprecedented. There are companies in Kansas City like Chateau Milk. Now, yes, that is a B2B, or excuse me, a B2C example, but how many other companies put milk in glass bottles?
Right.
You would have the finance people going, don't put the milk in glass bottles, right? They're a big dairy. Don't put it in glass bottles because it costs too much and the breakage is going to cost too much. And yet Chateau has done something unprecedented to the point where they not only give tours up in Osborne, Missouri, right? And
Right.
By the way, they're designing their ideal customer because it's all school buses, it's all little kids. And the other thing is they have milkmen. They have delivery routes where they bring it to your house. Jeff, when's the last time we saw milkmen?
I don't know, but supposedly my father was of milkman. No, I'm just kidding about that. Yeah, it was back in the maybe 70s they went away, early 70s. I don't know, I can't even remember, but definitely 60s they were around, I believe.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
So how do we take the customer in B2B to an impossible place? Do we have those kind of brainstorming sessions, right? With the brain trust inside of our organizations and with our customer base? Do we involve our customers in some of the creation of this stuff? I've got maybe not hundreds, but I've got tens of examples, probably 30 I could reel off, but I'll tell you what they can do. You got to stand for something bold. How do you divide the marketplace? And that makes some business owners nervous. But if you do it tactfully and professionally, you can have this issue of something that compounds. Everything I said earlier, number one, operational precision. If it's felt externally, that will compound without any added cost, time, or effort. Organizational fitness, purpose. What do we stand for? That will compound to the right audience, right? And this issue of we're bringing something unprecedented to the marketplace that answers not only the unspoken need, forget about the spoken need, you can get that anywhere. It's the unspoken need. How do we do this issue earlier of who's the detective? Do we employ ethnography? Once you start bringing that will start to communicate externally. And now that you've got those three things, you as a marketing guy, think of all the things you have that can inform your marketing now.
Yeah, no, so many things I love. I love the term organizational fitness. I think that's just is great. And and I think part of it, and you go back to the CFO example, counting finance people, and bring in IT or HR possibly, but they have a perception of the sales team because salespeople make a lot of money, and why, and they're kind of resentful in a way, and which is weird because without sales, you can't do. But I mean, how do you get beyond, what can a leader do, a CEO, the C-suite, to kind of change that perception and kind of, I think the best organizations, they support sales like a customer, like what I can do to make the customer experience better, like you said. But the people that talk to customers, there's two main groups. whether you're B2B or B2C, but definitely in B2B, there's customer service and there's salespeople. And you can throw in account management or, relationship management. But
Sure.
what's
Well,
your take on that and what leadership can do?
some of this is some people will say to me, so Sean, who's the ideal client? Who are you looking for? I always say it's what Jim Collins said years ago in Good to Great. I'm looking for a level 5 leader, somebody who's not only willful and resolute, so they're hungry, they got that fire in the belly, but man, have they got to be humble. The people I've seen do well with this, the senior leadership, they are humble, they are inquisitive, they are curious, they are open to new ideas like this. Think about this one, Jeff, to say to a CEO, the objective is not to grow. The objective is to fulfill the purpose. The ones who don't get it, their heads explode and they say, okay, Sean, there's the door. It was nice talking to you. The ones who are really deep, they'll say, what does that mean? Look, I'll say, I've spoken to your salespeople. Their biggest frustration is they feel like they don't have anything to sell, and they certainly don't feel like they have anything that sells itself. Uh, Mrs. CEO, how would this feel if you said to your salespeople, we're going to develop an organization that creates demand where without much of your doing, these inquiries are going to come in from ideal clients saying, I saw this, I heard this, I felt this. Man, can I speak to somebody to learn more?
Sure.
Your salespeople are going to go, you got to be kidding me. That's sales nirvana. I'd feel like I was in heaven.
Right.
Now you're an Apple salesperson. Jeff, why did you come in the store today? What can I help you with?
Uh-huh. Right. My watch
No,
won't sync
no
to my
traditional
iPhone.
selling involved. None.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. Anything else you would want to add? Any kind of a summary or closing remarks?
I think this issue of compounding, right? Because maybe the business owners, CEOs that are listening to this, let alone all the other professionals that are listening, there's a cost component people are always thinking about. I'm glad you picked up on organizational fitness. It's one of my favorite components of the 3 to take organizations through. I had a really awesome CFO once say to me, who was in the midst of an engagement, right? So we have a learning management system. Sometimes I lead people through the LMS and all these components. Sometimes we have others who will do it. And they said, we asked our senior leadership team, the executive leadership team, how unproductive do you think we are as a whole, as an organization? And the number that came up was 65%. He said, wow, they were all being honest. You think we're 65% unproductive. And all this guy did was take salaries plus fringe and got a number for the company. It was like $17 million. He said, multiply that by 0.65, 65%. He goes, that's what's being lost every year because we're misaligned and we have chaos and all the noise in the organization. He goes, that's why we need organizational fitness. So there's a little computation that everybody can do. How unproductive might we be? Multiply it by all the salaries, right? Plus 0.5, because that's usually, 1 times 1.5, because that's usually the fringe included, benefits, all that stuff.
Sure.
The cost is enormous in doing it the traditional way in sales and marketing. That's why we see, 4% net profit after taxes. It's insane. I've had clients say our revenue only went up 10%, but our profitability doubled.
Right. Yeah, it's phenomenal. Sean, what a great guest. I loved our conversation. We'll leave some contact information in the episode description so people can reach out to you. But thanks so much for coming on the podcast today.
It's a pleasure, Jeff. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Executives on the Front Lines. If you are interested in learning more about today's guest, you can schedule a 15-minute call with them by scanning the QR code or using the link in the episode description. Please join me every 2 weeks to learn from another great leader sharing insight that can help you and your business.